Loki is a character-driven story that has really shaped its world into something special. The set design and especially character writing is far above what I've seen for a story like this in a long time. Real quick before I get into it, only a small percentage of you who watch my videos are subscribed to the channel, so if you end up liking the video, subscribe. It costs nothing, and you can always unsubscribe later on if you want. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. Each character has a multifaceted dynamic to their progression, with nobody going purely in a straight line. Mobius in particular has been a standout. The subtle ways he changes pairs really well with how much Loki has his changes front and center. The subtle contrasts the obvious. For example, the most recent episode where you can see every little moment he starts to put together, how much the TVA has been lying to them. Every time Loki and him have spoken, he has always detected the lies, but over time his response to him has changed. At first he was harsh, upfront, and mostly uncaring, putting his job before his emotions. But in the latest interrogations, there is hesitation in his judgment. The bond they have cultivated over the series has grown pretty strong, and the payoff is his hesitation. The payoff is friendship. Even though he tells Loki that he thinks he's lying, he can't get it out of his head. It makes what happens in episode 4 all the more devastating. If you've seen the episode, you know what I'm talking about. The story itself is simple enough and effective. The governing body that oversees all of time is not what it seems, and the main characters begin to slowly unravel their world, and in turn themselves. But this show is carried by its characters. Episode 2 with Loki and Mobius just talking with each other, while trying to find where Sylvie was, is possibly my favorite episode. The chemistry they have together, and the way they made office research work exciting, even though some people have been critical of the world building. Personally, I think it does a fantastic job. There are some elements that weren't considered for sure. It is a bit strange that the sacred timeline isn't just one timeline, but includes the alternate reality that the Avengers get the stones from. However, most of the critiques of its world building, I think, aren't that effective. For example, the aesthetic of the TVA. At first, it may seem odd that the TVA is only made up of humans and they never deal with aliens almost at all. Even when they travel to places off-world, all they find is other people. But I think this critique is strange, because it ascribes some kind of perfectionist viewpoint to the TVA. Why wouldn't they have aliens? The better question would be, why do they need to? It's clear from episode 1 immediately that they aren't perfect. Even though they are very advanced with their technology, they still have an old office 80s 90s aesthetic. Maybe the TVA's true purpose only involves humanoids. Loki pokes many holes in the philosophies of the TVA, and they don't give sufficient responses to his critiques. The timekeepers and the origins of the TVA are kept a secret, with no clear indication as to why. The story does not want you to think they are truly all-powerful, nor does it want you to criticize the storytelling for their intentional imperfection. That would be like claiming a drama is bad because a character made the wrong choice. These elements aren't failed aspects of world building, they are flaws to the organization, in the same way that characters have flaws. One major aspect of this show is to subvert your viewpoint on their world, alongside the characters. Episode 1 forces Loki to accept that so much of his current and future existence is arbitrary. The Infinity Stones they cared so much about obtaining, the throne he wanted to claim, didn't mean anything. That doesn't mean the events that happened before mean nothing. Far from it. But to these office drones that only know about their desk job, a stone that doesn't even work in the TVA has no meaning to them. They leave them out carelessly because they are careless. They truly don't understand how much power the stones hold outside of their reality and the harm they can cause, but at the same time, any damage done could just be reset anyway, which does lead to one question that I hope is answered. Why take anything from the sacred timeline if everything will just get reset anyway? I'm assuming it's related to some kind of failed bureaucracy for the TVA, but I'm not too sure. An interesting thread to follow for sure. One critique that I do agree with is the fight scenes and strength of the characters. I'm not someone who always needs fight scenes to be entertained, but when they're shown, it's important to make them really good. But many of the fight scenes were below average for me, especially early on, like on the train with Sylvie, or Loki versus Sylvie in the supermarket. They didn't have the choreography they should have. This is also caused by Loki's forced power down in this show. I do think some people are overdoing it with the criticism because some abilities like Loki being able to read minds only happens in Ragnarok, a lot of time after the first Avengers movie. But even with the abilities shown in the show, he's a lot more powerful than this show is making him out to be. He shoots out generic magic blasts in one scene, and getting defeated by random train guards, and in the next, he is using advanced level telekinesis to repair an entire building in an instant. His power level fluctuates a decent bit throughout the story, and although it doesn't ruin it by any means, it could have had a bit more attention brought to it. But aside from the world building, the main draw here is easily the characters. Sylvie, Mobius, Loki, Hunter 15 even, all have something interesting about them. When writing dialogue between characters, the best kind you can make for an actor is for it to be subtle, for the emotions or more complex human aspects to be portrayed through the performance. When Loki sees how his story ends in the sacred timeline, he doesn't need to say a word for us to understand just how that affects him. Him seeing just how much Thor really did care about him was something he wasn't expecting to see. Mobius is an interesting character because of how ultimately neutral he has been for a large chunk of the series. He manipulates both sides of the coin, the TVA and Loki, to get what he wants. Weirdly enough, he has some similarities to him. with his tactics, but he's a lot more cunning. His strange fascination with jet skis, his views on time and the world. The acting from Owen Wilson is really amazing. When I saw him in the trailers, I did not expect to like him this much. Sylvie as well was definitely a surprise. The romantic tension between her and Loki was really enjoyable. You could see the tiny moments for Loki when he was really at a loss for words, with how to talk to her. Some people have said how narcissistic it is for Loki to fall in love with a version of himself, but in this case I disagree. She was taken from her timeline as a very young child. Most of her life has been running from the TVA. She is not like him, and that is what their journey to get off Lamentis really showed. They are definitely different people, and for them, it's more of a trauma bond. She happens to be another timeline version of him, but really, it's that they have similar experiences and can relate to each other. Not because they both had the same Loki life, but because they both struggled. I can't wait to see how this show concludes. But what do you think of Loki so far? Are you into it? Not into it? Let me know in the comments below. I hope to see you next time.